of the needs here. But we welcome to the program now Representative Trey Lamar. He represents District 8 and also has previously served as the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. Means it's his job to make sure we got the money coming in general. But Representative Lamar, I know you're just coming from the Capitol. We appreciate it, sir. Good to see you. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Gerard. Appreciate you having me. Glad to be in studio. The last few times I've been on, I have been remote, and although technology is nice, it just still it's nice to be in person.
Yeah, well, we're glad to see you as well. You guys have been in session now for a little over a week. Don't have our committee assignments yet. I'll kind of start by asking you that. What are you hearing? When do you expect to see those announcements?
Well, Speaker White, we had to get everybody sworn in. You know, it's a formal process. We did everybody but the governor last week, and then obviously Tate Reeves was sworn in with his inauguration yesterday. So during that time, since last Tuesday, I know Speaker Jason White, which is our new Speaker in the House, has been working diligently and hard on the committee assignments, which is not an easy task. You've got 122 representatives that all have the right to select their committees of preference, and then the speaker's got to put that into a formula that he feels is best. And so that's what he's been working on. We expect that to be announced probably the end of this week.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's fairly normal, though, isn't it? Isn't it, Representative Lamar? It's fairly normal, that sort of time frame?
It is. So, you know, roughly a week and a half or so if you go back to last Tuesday. And I think with a new speakership and 25 new freshmen in the House, that's actually getting it done pretty quickly. So, but that's what we believed is going to happen at the end of this week. So there'll be some folks that are happy, some folks that are not happy, and you know, but we're all on the same team, and hopefully they'll realize what part of the wagons they'll be pulling come Friday.
Well, at this point, is your desire to remain involved in Ways and Means?
It is. I think you and I have had many conversations about that for over the last several years.
Yeah.
We've started really some comprehensive tax reform that would be transformational for the state of Mississippi and the future generations of our state. We're not quite there yet, and I would like to continue to serve in that capacity so that hopefully we can get to a tax structure that rewards work and that's much more fair to our citizens for the future generations.
Okay. Well, where do you see that going at this point, Representative Lamar? Of course, we've got what I've described as kind of a down payment on full elimination of the income tax. We did make some progress there, eliminating the 3% bracket and then reducing the 5% down to 4% over 3 years. We're in the middle of that right now, as a matter of fact.
That is correct. And just to give you an idea, everything is on the table. And I just say it that way. We're taking a look at everything from income tax to sales taxes to property taxes. You know, we've got some real needs in this state. And so there's an opportunity for some great leadership to be provided over the next couple of years as to how we meet these needs that are either legal needs we have or legal requirements we have with the PERS system.
Yep.
There's no way around it. It just costs a lot of money. And it is what it is. And there's obligations there to the retirees and public employees of the state. And then we've got needs that are a core function of government with our highway system. We've got to continue to meet some of those needs. We have currently next to Alaska, the lowest gas tax in the state.
The country.
In the country, yes. Obviously in the country. So in Alaska, they've got some things up there in Alaska. Number one, they got a whole lot less roads. And then number two, they get this thing called oil that pays for a lot of their roads and government up there. So all that said, what we've been doing the last couple of years in the ways of gas taxes with our increased revenues that the state's bringing in, we're essentially subsidizing the lowest gas tax in the nation, other than Alaska, with money from our general fund. Obviously, if you look at those things, money from our general fund is paid only by Mississippians. That's your income tax. That's your sales taxes that come in mainly by Mississippians, I say. But the gas tax, that is paid by people driving from California to Florida, pay gas tax in the state. And so we need to look at that. We don't need to just be, hey, it's off the table. But the whole structure of taxes is on the table for us to look at, and the ultimate result will be how do we pay for our core functions of government and responsibilities that we have in a way that's the most beneficial, most fair, and most competitive for our citizens.
Okay. interesting. So the governor, I think, has made it clear that elimination of the income tax is a top, if not his top priority.
Yep.
He touched on that again yesterday, as I'm sure you're aware, in his inauguration speech, I should say. He talked about that. He also focused a lot on economic development and how he believes strongly in that as a way to just improve the overall quality of life in our state, job opportunities, of course, revenue, schools, everything does better when our economy's growing and we're thriving there. You got some thoughts on that?
Well, I appreciated the governor's remarks. I was, trying to listen, but it was a little cold yesterday.
Yeah,
I don't know if you were there yesterday or not.
I wasn't. I was on the show, but my daughter was across the street in the Secretary of State's office watching from inside.
Yeah, there was a brisk wind.
Yeah.
I think even to the point where it was a north wind, but affected. We had a little helicopter flyover, which was a neat aspect of the ceremony, and the helicopters appeared to be flying sideways at one time. But anyway, they made it. And again, the governor's remarks were good. I appreciated him mentioning the ultimate elimination of the individual income tax in Mississippi, which would make us the 10th state in the nation to not have an income tax, or what I like to call the tax on work.
Yep.
And so, obviously, sitting as the chair of Ways and Means, I joined the governor in those efforts. We've got to figure out ways to do it responsibly, and that's why everything's on the table.
Okay.
But the ultimate goal would be, even going back to what Lieutenant Governor Hoseman has said on many times, I think in his speech last week, that he believes, and I agree with him on this, that one of our biggest problems as a state is our workforce participation rate.
Yeah.
So, the old adage goes, if you want more of something, tax it less.
Yeah.
So why do we tax work if we don't have to? And I keep going back to that. I've said that over the years many, many times. We want more people working. We want them working more to provide for their families. Well, why don't we tax it if there's a better way to fund our government? And
sure.
So anyway, that's what we're going to be looking at.
Okay. Well, he pointed out, as you well know, the Lieutenant Governor, that our labor force participation rate, it lags behind the rest of the nation by almost 10 points. And it is a problem. The question I have, Representative Lamar, is why aren't they working? I feel like that maybe that our government or somebody, maybe we should commission a third party to go into the communities and find those that are part of that statistic, which are in the 49% that aren't working that can, and say, how come you're not working?
It's a challenge, Gerard. It is a challenge, and I don't pretend to have all the answers. There was a recent article that came out I think it was in the Wall Street Journal of all places, but Governor Reeves was interviewed along with that article, and so the listeners can go back and look and see what some of his answers were to those questions were about why people aren't working. There's lots of reasons. He mentioned that the historical part of PERS allowing people to retire at age 25 with pretty good money.
It is a big one.
In fact, I'll give you the best example I know is Speaker Gunn. I told him he can't go sit on the couch forever, but I had breakfast with him last week, and he said, "Hey, I got my first check today, my first check. I'm retired now." That
is a factor. I think the governor's right there.
And he said, "I didn't do anything," and now I said, "Well, you can't. We're not going to let you sit on the couch. You got to get out there and go to work." But some people, that provides the financial ability for those folks to, and they've worked their whole life. They take the position, "Hey, I don't want to work anymore," and that's their prerogative.
That's right.
That's an issue, and there's lots of other issues. Some of it is cultural. And there's not easy answers there.
I know, but you know what I'm saying though. It's like I don't know that we can just sit in the Capitol and make policy that'll change that without really understanding what's the root cause here. To address that. And I was just thinking about. Let's go to the people who are in this stat. This 49% say, "How come you ain't out there, working? We got plenty of jobs for you." I
would love some real commissioned or studied data on that, and I think that's the good idea. That would be something we could dig down into and really get to the root of that, and how we can improve those numbers. Because if you go from whatever we are, 53, 54%, up to improve 10 percentage points to 64, 65%. That makes a real difference in our state. Huge difference,
yeah. We got Representative Trey Lamar in the Element Well studio. We're stepping aside for Element Well studio. We're visiting with Representative Trey Lamar. So we talked a little bit about taxes and tax reform and some progress we've made there, Representative Lamar. One thing I want to share with you is I actually thought the first bill that was drafted and was put on the table, passed the House, did not pass the Senate, that did in fact call for some slight upward adjustments of sales taxes, but eliminated the income tax in a fairly short order. I actually think that was the best legislation we had.
I don't. Well, I drafted it, so
I know you did.
like
I didn't say that because of that. I've said it before. I thought that was a good bill.
So I agree with you 100%. In my opinion, sales tax is a much more fair tax, and I'm not alone in that. There are states all across the country where the overall sales tax rate is higher than what Mississippi's
That's right.
is.
When you combine the state, the city, the county,
all that. And so everybody pays the sales tax, and if you want, it gives more individual freedom to the taxpayer.
Yeah.
If they want to go work and earn their money and save it, well, they can do that.
Yeah.
Or they can go buy a boat and pay tax on it. But that was a much more, in my opinion, fair and better plan. But just what I would say is just sit tight. Like I said, a few minutes ago, there's. The whole code is on the table. We're going to continue to take strong looks at everything, and we've got new leadership in the House, and obviously Lieutenant Governor there is in the Senate. I'm going to keep pushing for, as long as I sit in this seat, for a more fair tax code that actually rewards work going forward, and we're going to look at all the different ways we could accomplish that in a reasonable time frame.
And there are likely some retirees out there that are mad at us because they're seeing us as advocating for raising their taxes since their income is tax exempt, and we can't change that. I don't think that's something that happened a long time ago, and they would see increase in the sales tax. But you and I have done the analysis and the modeling on that. It's a tiny amount of money, and I think I even shared with you and former Speaker of the House, Philip Gunn, maybe we can come up with something to kind of work around that.
I think there's some compromises there that I'm studying and working on, and when the time is right, I'll come back on and we'll work through all that. We've discovered some other options that we have, and I look forward to having further, more in-depth discussions on that this session.
And we should also point out, you just shared with me on the break that we just got our latest revenue reports from the Department of Revenue, DOR. We're still looking good there.
We're looking great there. We're up. We're halfway through the year, so this is the 6-month mark, and we're up right at $100 million over the estimates for this year, and that's after the tax cuts that we've had. So, some of the more liberal media has pointed out, well, they're down on income tax collections. Are down. Of course they're down. We cut the income tax on work.
That's what we wanted.
That's what was designed to do, but we're up on sales tax. We're up on other areas. And so, we're good. And I'll say this, we're still bringing in roughly $1 billion more than what we're spending on state government, and we're spending about $1 billion more on state government than we were about 3 years ago.
Yeah,
so we've had tremendous increases in our expenses, and I would argue with you, and I know Speaker White and I have had many conversations about this. I've heard him say the same thing. The way that we've increased the spending the last 2 to 3 years is not sustainable. So that's one of the things that he wants to get a handle on, and I believe you're going to see that from House leadership going forward, is that we cannot continue to have $200-300 million increases a year. Now, granted, a big part of that was our teacher pay raise, and those are needed investments that was needed, but we can't have that every year.
Yeah,
it's not sustainable. So we're still $1 billion to the good in what we're bringing in. And so there's room for continued investments in our highway infrastructure. There's room for any investments we need to help make and shore up the PERS system, which is a huge topic.
Yep.
And quite frankly, there's room to continue to work on eliminating the income tax in the state. And those are our major goals.
Well, let's keep working on it methodically and responsibly, and I feel confident you guys will. So let's talk about some other things. What about the ballot measure process? That's one that always seems to come up. It gets a lot of attention. I'm sure you hear it from your constituents. I hear it on our text line, and just anecdotally.
Yeah. So it ignites a lot of emotion around that issue. There's probably some people talking about it right now. I heard Speaker White, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, and I agree with him on this. We expect the House to move a bill and pass that early on in the session. So, what the Senate does with it, I don't know. That bill died in the Senate last year, but the House has passed it now a couple different times, and I expect the House to pass it again this year.
Okay.
The only thing, if we're getting a little bit in the weeds to me, that I want to change in the version that passed the House last year did have this in there. I don't believe that should be allowed to change the Constitution. If people want to use the ballot measure to put something in statutory law, that's fine. And that's that's what I support.
Okay.
And so I was glad to see that change being made, and I expect that change to be in the future legislation as well.
I think that has broad support in both chambers.
Yeah.
I think it's really, it comes down to what the signature requirements should be. That seems to be where the most contention is between the House and the Senate.
That's
we'll
right.
see where that goes. And there's some, Representative Lamar, that don't want a ballot measure process whatsoever.
Yeah.
They've indicated that. But seems like it's something that people want overall, I would say, broadly.
Well, the people want it. And and there's – I'm not so naive to I see both sides of it. I know that can be manipulated at times. At the time, right before the time the Supreme Court was looking at that case and ended up striking down as unworkable the current scheme, current constitutional scheme on ballot initiative.
Yeah.
There's a talk of people having ballot initiatives on wine and grocery store and marijuana and Medicaid expansion and abortion, and all these things that I'm not going to get into each one, but we're talking about really selling wine in grocery stores. Is that really something that we need to end up in our Constitution? And the answer for that is no, in my opinion. So that part of it needed to be changed.
Yeah.
If it goes in statutory law and something silly through a clever marketing scheme ends up in law, you can change it.
Yeah.
And so I'm okay with that.
Okay. Well, and that again, I think has broad support.
Sure.
Statutory is supposed to embedded in the Constitution. Let's talk about school choice, education freedom. This is something that it gets discussed almost every session. We have some degree of that already with the dyslexia scholarship, the special needs scholarships. We have charter schools. It stops short of what most proponents of school choice want, more universal school choice. And it's not something I felt like that the prior speaker had a lot of interest in really pushing. I don't feel like the lieutenant governor does either, honestly. The governor seems to have a strong interest in it. He doesn't come up a lot. But Speaker of the House Jason White says he's at least willing to take a look, and let's talk about it.
And that's just one thing I've been excited about with Speaker Jason White's leadership so far is, we're not going to be scared to talk about tough topics.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And we don't need to be – the leadership of this state does not need to be naive. Might I add the Republican leadership of this state. So the people of this state elected – Republican office holders in wide margins all across the state, whether it be through the legislative body or through statewide offices. And we would be really ignorant of reality if we don't look at school choice as being a hot topic all across this country.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to go far. We just look right across the river to Arkansas to see what Governor Sanders did over there. And so it's not just Arkansas. It's West Virginia. It's Arizona. It's a bunch of states. Somebody told me today it's 20-something states that have some version of school choice. I know Florida is a big one.
Yeah,
it's a hot topic right now in Texas and in Louisiana.
And Alabama's close.
And they're coming. So you can't just ignore it.
Yeah.
And so I would challenge either that be the lieutenant governor, the Senate leadership, or anybody else who just wants to ignore it. I don't think that's what the voters sent us here to do, is to ignore something that is that our parents and taxpayers of this state are saying is important.
Yeah.
So let's look at it. Obviously, I think that the devil is in the details on something like that.
That's right.
But it doesn't have to be overly complicated. But we can empower parents to have more choice and freedom if that's what's best for their children. And there's really not anything wrong with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do we do it without hurting people?
That's right.
That's the key.
Well, the goal should be, and I'm an advocate for it, and I just want folks to know, and I know you believe this way as well. The goal should be not to harm anything that's working. We don't want to mess anything up that's functioning properly. Rather, we want to provide some options that help and support and improve things where improvement is needed.
That's right. I just keep going back to, there are children sitting in areas of this state that really aren't being afforded an education.
Yeah. We need to address that.
And there are moms or dads of those children that don't have options. And they don't have options because the law doesn't allow them to have options.
Yeah.
That's not right. So can we help those kids without doing damage to other institutions that are doing a good job? I think we can. Okay. It's challenging, but I think we can get there.
Well, I agree with you, and I'm glad to hear your position in that respect. So always appreciate you coming on there, Representative Trey Lamar, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you down at the Capitol, and it looks like it's going to be an active session at a minimum.
It's a lot of balls in the air to juggle, but we're going to keep hacking away at it and hopefully come away with some progress for the people of the state.
Sounds good. Appreciate it. Coming right back, folks, in the Element Wealth